this is your host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Climb podcast. We are here today to learn more about a personal climb. We have Natalia Hernandez with us. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I love it already.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. We were having great conversation before we hit the record button, so this is definitely going to be a fun episode for all of you. So please introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us a little bit more about you.
All right. I am Natalia Hernandez. I am a certified Enneagram and relationship coach, and I help people heal, mend, or end their relationships.
You have that so succinct. So let's unpack that a little bit. How did this become an interest of yours? What led you on that path career-wise?
To be frank, all my failed relationships.
You wanted to get it right.
I did. I did not want to die alone. And I was on that path. I discovered the Enneagram so I'm a type 7, and that showed me all the reasons why my relationships didn't work. It showed me everything in general of all my past, but basically it showed me why I left every relationship I had ever been in. I was the one to get up and go. And I knew that happened, but I didn't know why. I didn't know how to stop it. And it just seemed like the minute things got too hot or too many bickering or arguments were happening, I would just run. And kind of like in a crappy way. Like I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. And I would leave, leaving the other person to think I never cared enough or I didn't love them enough. And so it was, you can say I'm kind of like the man in the relationship that would just leave, right? And you're like, you never loved me. That's how I was, and knew I had that pattern. And when I saw and learned it was because I'm a type 7, it all made sense, which means type 7s, their biggest fear is to be limited or controlled, put in a box, or made to feel intense emotions. So no one likes to feel sad or upset or disappointed, but for a 7, those emotions are magnified. So in order to avoid that, I would just run. I would do the complete opposite of what led me there. And in my relationships, if there was an argument happening, in my mind, it went, this isn't fun. This isn't how it was supposed to be. I can't handle this. I need to remove myself from the situation. And that's what I did. And then I got married and the pattern was still there because I hadn't known about the Enneagram. And I saw myself going down this rabbit hole of saying, oh my gosh, we're arguing. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I can get through this. I would leave the room whenever we would have disagreements about things because I didn't know how to emotionally handle it. And then when I learned the Enneagram, I went, oh my God, if I don't change this, I'm going to end up alone. I will leave my marriage like I've left everything else. Right. And that helped me see and understand that the heavy, intense feelings aren't a problem. I can handle disappointment and frustration without wanting to yell or get defensive or run away. And it really helped me get grounded. And then through coaching, I got coached a whole ton. And that really helped me understand my need for always wanting to be happy and know that I can argue and guess what? Still be happy with my partner and feel safe and grounded. And so that is what led me to become certified. And that's what led me to change my relationships around and then eventually help other people do the same thing.
What an incredible story. So I appreciate you sharing that because it sounds like it was some trying times there in the beginning. And I already know how incredible the Enneagram has been in my life. It sounds like it has also been equally transformative in yours. So we have not talked about this particular personality test on the show yet. So just a little background, and feel free to jump in. So it's 9 interconnected personality types. And what I personally love about this particular test is that you not only learn about what motivates you, but you also learn about what number you tend to emulate in those times of stress and in those times of your healthiest. And so for me, just like any personality test, it expedites that process of getting to know someone. And I have actually, once I discovered my own type and the type of my partner, then I was just on this frenzy of, it helps with my team. It obviously helps me with my consulting clients because we're working with each other for a limited period. And so if I know their Enneagram, it's going to adjust my approach. It's going to adjust how I follow up with them. Are they going to be someone that takes that information and runs with it? You know, do they just need a summary? Are they going to be more self-directed or need more guidance? So it has helped tremendously. Anything that you would add that you think is really important for people to know that aren't familiar with the Enneagram?
Yeah, exactly that. I think I'll just add too, it really shortens, like you said, the time period in how you need to handle things. I'm a type 7. Don't micromanage a type 7. Like, we got it. You can give a small piece of information and type 7s can run with it. They don't need heavy overlook and assistance and guidance and hand holding. And that is so important to know in a business. You just let them go and be sure that they will provide the best outcome for you because they want the best outcome. So, and even in conversations, I have friends that are a type 8, for example. I'm not going to give them a book of information when I know that they want direct, couple lines, and then let them run with that, right? Every person has their own way, and it's helpful to know so that, like, for example, my husband's a type 5. He loves information. For me, a beautiful example I think everyone can relate to is when you're going out to dinner and I say, hey, do you want to go eat at this new place that's out right now? I can't just say that. If you say that to a 7, they'll say, yeah, let's do it. Right. A type 5 will say, where is it? What's on the menu? What are the prices? Do they list the ingredients for each dish? How far away is it? Do we have to call in advance to make a reservation, right? They want all the information. So for 5, you give them the entire book, you give them the manual, and they will spend their time reading it and then make a decision.
What a different approach. That's a great example. But I can also say that knowing your Enneagram and your partner's Enneagram or anyone that you have any type of relationship with helps to depersonalize, wouldn't you say? So like, I'm thinking of how that can play out in like couples counseling, for example, where you as the 7 may approach, you're so excited. There's this new restaurant. You want to try it out. It's a no-brainer for you. And the way your partner as a 5 responds, you could potentially take that personally. Like, you don't want to go? Like, this could be really fun. What do you mean? Then when you figure out that it's not a no, it's more of a, I just need more information, that can potentially avoid issues down the line or a potential conflict. So that's such a great kind of spin-off as to how a little bit of information can go so far.
It's true. And it's something that I had to learn in the beginning. It's not that he doesn't want to go to a party with me or go to a new restaurant with me. So I don't need to take it personally, which I used to. His reason, right, like you said, the core motivation in the beginning is to make sure that he feels competent and self-sufficient. He needs to feel, that is how he feels safe and secure before stepping out into the world, so to speak. That's what helps him feel safe. For me, feeling safe is the freedom of not knowing. Right. If I know too much information, then I'm not excited anymore and I don't want to do it. So it's just knowing the reasons behind why people make the decisions that they make. And it helps you have more empathy for people as a whole as well. Instead of saying that person is rude or that person is lazy or any of these kind of adjectives, there's a reason why someone is much more assertive versus someone who would rather play the mediator. Big reasons behind them.
Absolutely. And I also think of a lot of the couples work that I've done previously. And so much of it is about really honing in on each individual's needs, helping them to be aware of what those needs are. Then we have to get them comfortable to communicate, but also how are they going to communicate that? What do they need in times of conflict? And I can see the Enneagram being so helpful in shedding some light on that because it can be really hard. There are some people that are incredibly self-aware and they know that and they can articulate that. And there are other people that would really struggle and need some guidance. And even in the best of scenarios, even if someone has those skills, if they're triggered or if the approach was not the way that they would like it to be, things can all go awry. So how do you incorporate this in your work? Is this an automatic with every couple that you work with? Do you have them take a test?
I do. I
Okay.
actually provide the assessment. So every client gets a code from the Enneagram Institute. They go and they take the assessment. I get the results. And then our very first session together is a deep dive into basically their childhood and then into adolescence and adulthood to show their patterns, behaviors, the reasons why they communicate the way they do, they make the choices that they have, their careers that they've stepped into. It's really showing them a reflection of all of that before we even step into the coaching. So it's a foundational tool that I use to let someone know, hey, this is who you are in the good and the bad and in all of it. This is who you are in a nutshell. And so now let's take this information and really get into coaching and carve out the future that you want when it comes to your relationships, your business, or whatever.
So tell me more about the connection to childhood, because I'm sure there's kind of these generalities, but I'm sure you've seen it play out multiple times. So my understanding of the Enneagram is that personality type really develops based on early experiences and that then gets reinforced. And a lot of it is like this self-preservation in your family of origin. Can you speak a little bit to that and what you've discovered through your work?
Yeah. So exactly that. So basically, we all had adaptive qualities about us when we were younger. They were things, and it's not even to say that our caretakers or our parents did any wrong, right? Sometimes it's not about that. It is just happens to be that child's perception. It was just their way that they saw the world. And that's why you have siblings that are so different because their view of their childhood was very different. So every child internalizes things in their own way. And so as an example, I'll just use myself so it's clear for everyone. As a 7, we grow up wanting to be happy and satisfied all the time and feel content, right? There's 2 ways to look at that. You can look at that and say, that wasn't provided enough as a child. So I had to formulate that for myself so that I could feel safe and secure growing up. And that worked really well when I was a child, but then you grow up and it doesn't work so well. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is one that I relate more to, which is when I was growing up, my parents showed me so much love and I never saw them argue. And to me, the world was perfect and wonderful and happy all the time. Little did I know that they weren't perfect, right? And they had their arguments and disagreements, but it was always behind closed doors. So I wasn't privy to any of that. So my perception of the world was everyone is happy. Everyone grows up in a happy family and life and household. And then when I became an adult and I got into my own relationships and saw, wait a minute, there is no perfect. People have disagreements. People have arguments. I couldn't understand why. I didn't know why I was arguing because I just had this whole vision from when I was younger that everything should be perfect because that is what I saw. And so I always wanted to continue being happy and fulfilled and content and all of that. And so when I would run into these arguments and these issues in romantic relationships, my thought was, this isn't right. This can't work because my parents didn't do this. So I would leave. And so I had to learn to break that pattern and say, my childhood might not have been the way I thought it was in my mind. So there's 2 ways you can really look at your childhood is the reality of what happened or the perception that that child had as they were growing up.
I really appreciate that distinction because in my mind, I can relate more to the first scenario that you described. And I think the one that you experienced is a little bit more unique, but how it manifested and played out in your own life, I think is something we can all relate to, regardless of what type we are, where learning how to regulate your emotions, learning how to have a healthy disagreement, learning how to be more aware of inherently what is going on inside of you and what you need and being able to express that. Those are all things that I don't believe are inherent things that we're born with. We ultimately need some sort of guidance and a model, and we need to see that play out in our own lives, and we need to know that everything is ultimately going to be okay. And I think this other piece of I think what I've learned in this phase of my life, and I'm sure you can relate to this, but in such an extreme way, is that, and it really was this harsh reality because I am kind of this eternal optimist, and I became more of a realist after going through a divorce and being a business owner and working in different places with different people, that there are these fleeting moments of happiness, and you have to consciously make that choice to embrace them, to savor it, to choose your area of focus. There is always going to be difficulty and challenge and things that are thrown at us that we weren't prepared for. That's normal, that's natural, and it seems like in your experience, you didn't necessarily have a lot of those moments. So when that actually happened, I'm sure that could have been devastating, and you ultimately had to figure out how to work that through. What would you say to that piece?
Yeah, I mean, that is something that I think everyone starts off obviously from when you're younger, but then you get into adulthood and it's a really big struggle piece. And so something that the Enneagram shows you a little bit is, so types 8, 9s, and 1s tend to have instincts that they notice from the body. So body reactions, they'll tap their pen on the table, they'll move their knee, they'll get stomach pains, they'll get anxiety, they'll get different kind of gut instincts. It's sort of like the body knows that there's something wrong before their mind can catch up, before they can feel it in their heart. They're dominant in the gut instinct is what it's called. Those are the 8, 9s, and 1s. The 2s, 3s, and 4s have their heart center as the most dominant. So they have intense feelings. They feel more than they think rationally and more than what their body is telling them. And then you have types 5, 6s, and 7s, where we are all in our heads. We will rationalize and overthink everything more than we're able to feel and more than our body is alerting us to. So I think if you can pinpoint, obviously you have to know what your type is, and really pay attention to that, that will help a lot when it comes to conflict resolution, when it comes to making decisions, when it comes to planning things out. It really helps you get a lot more centered and it helps you relax. It gives you a clearer direction to step out of your mind and pay attention more into your heart, or get out of your feelings and think a little more rationally, or go for a run because your body needs to wake up versus you being in your head all the time. So I think all of that helps in a really big way. When it comes to navigating conflict that you might not have realized was as big of an issue for you from when you were little, but then you become an adult and it's like you wonder why everyone's in therapy when they're adults.
Right. Well, I appreciate you going through all of that. That's really helpful. And it's also a reminder that one size doesn't fit all. So it really is about knowing how stress shows up in your body, how you are going to be more inclined to react to something. And I think the beauty of the Enneagram, or really any personality test that sheds light on the specifics of us, number one, it normalizes it. We know we're not alone. There are other people that experience life similar to us. But then I think additionally, now we have that awareness, and there are absolutely things that we can do. So there's your wing, right? So you'll have your primary type, but then you tend to emulate kind of more one side or the other on that, 9-point circle. And then, like I said, with, trying to really embody those traits of that number that you can relate to in those times of stress or health, that you can really do some work around making some shifts. So tell me a little bit about how you were saying initially knowing the type and kind of doing that deep dive and understanding a little bit more of these couples and their childhood, and then kind of how that's manifested through life. How are you actually using some of this and beyond the Enneagram too, some of those strategies that you find are helpful with all couples?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that I work on is communication. Well, obviously, there's an aspect of the self-awareness first, right? Which is where the Enneagram comes in. They know about themselves. But then we move into communication, because I think a lot of, or the majority of every kind of problem we face comes down to communication. So based on your type, I have this board up here, and I put all sort of like each person's top information up on there. And then if they're an individual in front of me or a couple, we go through different scenarios. So I'll have someone bring up, if it's a couple, their latest disagreement, right? And then it's sort of like I have them mirror each other and say, well, do you understand how, as a type 1, why should we want the house to be organized and kept clean all the time? Can you see where that is coming from? It's not because she's trying to be a pest or a pain or tell you what to do. It's just, for her, organization is important. It's a sense of, control that she's able to have. So I show that the other partner that experience from that other person's lens, and then it makes sense to them. And then it's vice versa, right? And also something really helpful is, and I'm just saying a type 1 because you're a type 1, I feel like it would relate more. Type 1s have a heavy inner critic, right? So it's important for your partner to understand, or a boss or anybody else, if they're working with a type 1, to know that if that individual, if that employee is being really harsh on themselves, to help them know that it's okay, not everything has to be perfect. We can relax, right? There's a sense of, it's time now for you to step away from this project, step away from this conversation, and go have fun. Don't clean, go have fun. Go do something else. And people can relate to each other a lot better that way. And so then the disagreements turn more into understanding of one another and having more of a conversation, as opposed to we're fighting over X, Y, and Z. But no, it's actually we're fighting because we're not understanding each other. It's never the issue, right? It's never like the laundry that's the problem. It's the fact that we didn't communicate with each other what we wanted, what we meant, and giving each other a deadline. So that is what we do. And if it's not in couples, if it's an individual, it's the same exact thing, whether they're coming to me for a relationship in their marriage or arguing with their mom, right? It's the same exact situation. It's using your strengths and weaknesses. I tend to think that like your weaknesses is your superpower, because if you can shift that just a slight degree, you're going to make such huge improvements in every area of your life, in business and everything. Right. So I really focus on that, and I bring that up, and we do examples and real life scenarios and some role playing, right? And I kind of like purposely try to trigger to see then how you would respond and catch it in real time and go, okay, great, you noticed that. Now, what if we had some more fun? What if we weren't trying to get someone to do what we're asking them to do, if that's not really something that they would naturally do on their own? Right. So it's real life examples, and just especially with partners, showing both of them where the other person is coming from and the reasons behind it, that helps everybody understand each other better.
So what a positive spin, viewing weaknesses as a superpower, because once you uncover it and you know that it's there, you can almost call it what it is, and that it doesn't have to remain a weakness, that you do have a choice in terms of how you handle it. And it also sounds like you spend a lot of time really getting to the heart of what's truly going on. So kind of uncovering what's behind the scenes and almost like pulling back the curtain for each partner. Obviously, once they feel that it's a safe space to do that, to be a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more open, honest about what's going on behind the scenes.
Well, because like, let's not beat around the bush, right?
Sure.
Like, to not waste, okay, here's a 7 in action. Like, let's just go. Let's just move on to the next thing, right? This is where I go. But really, it's the most effective way. We can talk about, why the laundry wasn't done when we said it was going to be done, so we're blue in the face. But that's not the point, right? Let's beat around the bush. Let's not beat around the bush and just get straight to it and say, okay, but I'm feeling X, Y, and Z, and this is the reasons why. Now tell me your story. What's your perspective? Why didn't you do it? Right? Like, let's really get down to it.
Sure.
And it helps resolve issues so much quicker. And then disagreements turn into conversations, and everyone moves on.
Well, and I can also speak from personal experience where being the one and having that self-critic, most people are very aware of what those weaknesses are. We don't need somebody to tell us. But if that's used against us by our partner, right, the person that we love the most, that can be extremely triggering when you can remove it and almost take it one level further. And it's not necessarily, like you said, about a lot of these minute details, that it's really about maybe something a little bit bigger and these themes and these patterns. It goes back to what I was saying before about being able to depersonalize it a little bit. And it's not necessarily that one partner is angry at another partner because of what they did. It's about how they made them feel, right?
I love that you hit on this, because it reminded me in the very beginning when I was dating my husband. Again, he's a type 5. I don't know if we mentioned that. I'm a 7, he's a 5. And in the very beginning, I would get so frustrated, and I thought to myself, I don't think this is going to work, because I would want to be in social settings all the time, and he wouldn't. So, kind of like what you just said about using it against the person, I would say, well, why are you being so antisocial? Why don't you want to hang out with my family? What's wrong with you? And looking back now, I'm mortified, because this happens in the workforce as well. We pinpoint someone as being something when they're not. And it's not that he was antisocial or unfriendly. It's just, for him, he needs to preserve some energy, and being around a lot of people every day depletes him of that personal space that he needs in order to feel comfortable. Now I know that, and it's like mortifying to think back at that time, but I think that's why it's so important what you said, to not wield that as a weapon, but instead to understand and say, oh, he can hang out for maybe half the day, and then let's go home. So he can just hang out and go read a book on his own or do all that. He doesn't need to be there all day like I would.
So that is a great concrete example of how you can reach compromise so much quicker. You can still get what you need, and he can ultimately still get what he needs, but there's a little bit more forethought. It's like once you've had a few scenarios like that, and he gets clearer on how important it is to be social for you, and you also understand he needs that time to recharge, you can be a little bit more selective, where it's like, you being here with me really matters. This is a significant time. How can we make that work? And you're approaching it with so much more compassion, and it can feel a lot less defeatist, I would think, where like, I can totally relate to that moment when you were questioning, is this ultimately going to work? Like, this is so fundamental to who I am, and this person doesn't seem to get it. And it's not that at all. That's probably one of the things he loved the most about you, but you being that way has an impact on who he is. And so what a beautiful blend of like, there's so many options. Now we can problem solve and compromise. It's like, not that you can't go, but like, he needs an exit strategy, or maybe to pick and choose, and it's not going to be at every single event, but maybe the ones that are the most significant. Or if he's had that time to recharge, maybe he can be there for the full time. So it sounds like you found ways to navigate that. Exactly. Have you ever found a couple that the Enneagram has not worked for?
No. What I have found are individuals not wanting to accept certain things.
Yeah.
That I have. It's always worked in the sense that So it's hard when you find something out that you've always known has bothered you, but now that you know, now you have a choice, right? It's kind of like, I don't remember that saying. It's like when you don't know something, it's bliss. Oh, ignorance is bliss.
Yes,
there we go.
It's
like ignorance is bliss.
You've now shined the light and they have a choice. And some people can get really comfortable in whether it's blaming or there's some external force. And now it's like, let's call it what it is and we can deal with it. I can imagine that being very hard for some people.
That's hard. The moment they see it and we do the deep dive and all that and they're in there with their partner, it all makes sense. They're like, oh man, like, yeah, I get it. But the application in real world is knowing information doesn't change you. It's using the information to change that changes you. And so I love when people love the Enneagram, but if you're not applying it in real life, well, you've just learned a bunch of things. Congratulations.
Sure.
So the coaching aspect, Enneagram always works in the sense that everyone understands themselves. It's the application of now let me choose better words. Let me choose better ways of explaining myself. I can very easily walk away from the room every time I get into an argument with my husband or disagreement. I can choose to do that. But that's not going to further the cause. So now I make it a point to keep my feet firmly planted on the ground to make myself have the conversation that I know I need to have. And that is the change that is needed when people are in any kind of therapy or coaching or self-help to actually implement, now that you know what sort of like your weakness, quote unquote, tends to be.
Exactly. So it's still all about what they do with that information and whether or not they are able to take that action. Would you ever say that there are two particular Enneagram types that should not be in a relationship together?
That's funny. I might have said 1 and 7.
Yeah. And I am a testament to the fact that it works beautifully and I can speak to that. So I definitely want to hear your thought to this, but this is something I feel so passionate about so as a 1, I envy a 7. So for me, never really learned in my family of origin how to relax. I was adult right out of the womb, right? Very parentified. So for me, fun is not an automatic switch that you flip. And so now having this partner where that's his natural inclination, he views every situation as an adventure. Every day is something new and exciting. There is not anything I could bring up that he wouldn't be willing to try. And so for me, it has opened my eyes to really this more enriching life. And we had talked before we started recording about how in the reverse, me being a lot more planful and detail oriented and organized has really helped him in terms of structuring his life, managing finances, planning for the future. He's got his estate planning done and he's got everything in order. And so it can be a beautiful thing, but we talked about timing is everything and how a lot of it has to do, I think, with where you're at in your life and where you are on your journey. And I guess my answer to my own question would be that when you have this knowledge, I don't think that any two people can't ultimately take that information, put it into practice, and enhance the connection. The ultimate long-term compatibility is going to be based on so many other factors, but the personality type in and of itself, I don't think has to be a deal breaker. Tell me your thoughts.
No, at all. You know what I actually think could be a good experiment, which I've never thought of. So my husband is a 5, and just so happens to be that the line is connected for the 7 to the 5. So the 7 at their absolute healthiest point tends to emulate a type 5. And I feel like that is the missing piece to make me whole, to balance me out.
Sure.
So your husband is a 7, you're a 1. So maybe those qualities of a 7 is what's missing in you that could make you whole. I know there are other missing.
Well, so if you look at that's the line for me too. So me at my best, I am a 7, which is like so contradictory to my personality, but something I want to embrace.
Yes. Yes, but
Sure.
but then let's also talk a little bit about the wings, right? Would you have more of a wing? And some people don't really have wings, but you're a 2.
I'm a 2 all the way. Others over self, all the way, the helper.
But see, that's a beautiful thing. And I think that is also why your relationship works out, is because you're loving. You're so loving. Twos, if when you tap into that wing, twos are very loving. They want to feel loved and appreciated and admired and all of that. And 7s are great at helping you feel that way.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons why you guys work out so well, is because of that, side of a 2 there.
Couldn't agree more.
But yeah, I think if everyone looks at sort of like their healthiest type and it can access some of that, you go, oh, now I see why I'm drawn to someone who's so completely different and opposite from me. Right? 7s and 5s are different. 7s and 1s are really different. Well, maybe it's because there's a part of that person that I'm either denying, right? Like at my lowest point, I pick up the traits of a type 1. But that's good information for me to know, because I know if I feel like I'm getting irritated or I'm trying to control things, that is my sign that I need to relax. Yeah. That I need to go and get this energy out of me and this anxiety out of me and find something else to do. And so it's a really good, helpful way to have a type 1 in my life, to be that reflection back to me of, okay, what do I need to do now to center myself to move more towards the 5?
And I'm just thinking of so many scenarios. There isn't any scenario where having this information would not be helpful. But I'm thinking if you're considering entering not only into a romantic relationship, but a business partnership, or if you're thinking about obviously boss to employee or colleague to colleague, who you're going to seek out in your office that is going to be your go-to for certain scenarios. But even beyond that, I mean, I think it almost... So this is a funny situation. So when we had our holiday parties, so my partner had his, I had mine, we went to each other's. And for his, he is a plumber, they have electrical, HVAC, so like a very different field. And we had all of his team complete the Enneagram over dinner. And everything made sense. There were all these light bulbs going off. And so it was fascinating, and we still joke and reference it now. But from there, it has definitely helped him in terms of, so he actually has 2 employees that are both 6s, but they have different wings. And so understanding how they might initially approach a situation differently, but how they ultimately handle it is completely different. So I will definitely include a link in the show notes for people to figure out their type if they don't already know it, if they have some interest. What are some books that you would recommend, or some other resources for people who are new to their Enneagram journey?
So I also, the Enneagram Institute, that Enneagram Institute website, that is the go-to for everyone.
Yes.
I also do Enneagram typing sessions individually outside of coaching, so someone can sign up for that. I have some books that I'm trying to find now.
That are handy.
That
Fantastic.
are handy.
These are readily available.
I'm reaching for them. Hold on.
I love that. We have them in real time.
Designing Your Life is a good one by, who is this? Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. There is one main one that I can't find now. Oh, Lord.
So The Road Back to You I found very helpful. I know that there's some religious connotation, but
that's the one I was going to say.
Beautiful book. Okay, so you found that one helpful as well. So I'll definitely include the information to those books in the show notes as well. Yeah, I think just providing resources, and this is just, again, another tool in the toolbox. And I think it's something we can all use and benefit from, but kind of one of many tools to navigate. One piece that I wanted to ask too before we wrap up is kind of your approach as a coach, maybe as opposed to a couples counselor or a therapist. How would you describe your approach in contrast?
So for me, I've always considered coaching to be a short-term situation. So some people do coaching 3 months, some 6 months, maybe even a year. I work with couples or individuals for 6 months. Okay. It is very goal-oriented. So therapy is amazing for anybody and everybody to understand their childhood, to understand things that have happened right now, to help them process emotions and feelings and hard times, right? And hardships.
There's more depth, it sounds like.
It's very deep, intense, and it's really, great for like long-term continuous support. Counseling is a little more short-term, but also very in-depth. It's also a lot of processing emotions and wounds and traumas and things like that. Coaching, from my point of view, we do not dive deep. I personally don't handle traumas. We do dive deep into emotions based from your childhood lightly, simply because the Enneagram reveals it to us. There's no hiding from it. So we discuss that, we talk about that, but then I move on. My focus is very much in getting your issue resolved. So if you are confused about whether you want to stay in your relationship or leave, we set a goal for 6 months to sort that out. Not for you to have the decision made, but for you to get the clarity to then make the proper decision. If you want to heal the relationship, if you want to mend the relationship, you want to argue less, communicate better, in 6 months, we tap lightly into your childhood, but only through the lens of the Enneagram, because I'm not a therapist. It's only through the lens of the Enneagram and understanding yourself and what you've been through. And then setting out a roadmap of every week, we're going to use the tools that are there and other coaching tools that I have to understand yourselves a little better and how you're relating to one another. And then take actionable steps. So we're going to go deep into what you can say differently, what you can do differently, how you can express yourself, and then play out those examples in our coaching sessions, so that when you're no longer with me, you can do them in real time, because in your real life, because the goal is that you're with me for 6 months, and then hopefully I don't see you again. And then you're off, and when you encounter an argument or a situation or some kind of roadblock in your relationship, you're able to think back and go, oh, wait a minute, yeah, I can shift my perspective and look at this differently now. And I don't need to tap into my childhood and what happened when I was 10 and all of that. I can focus on where I am right now and then move forward.
Okay, that was a helpful distinction. So are there any screening tools that you would use in the beginning that might rule out somebody being appropriate for this particular coaching style and process?
I have a very basic intake form when someone signs up for a consultation with me. It's just some basic questions like, why are you looking for coaching at this time? What have you tried in the past? And if someone has written in there that they've been to therapy their whole life, or that they have worked with other coaches on the same issues and have not moved forward, those are the only people I might not consider, unless they are also putting in their information, which has happened before, that they're in an abusive relationship. That I'll reach out to them, I'll call them, I'll speak to them, but I will refer them out to a therapist or someone else for assistance on that. And for those who have been in long-term support for so long, coaching is in my view, a short-term goal-oriented setup. So we're working on one thing and we're moving on, resolving it and moving on. Those individuals need longer support, more in-depth reasoning as to maybe something hasn't landed for them and they need more of a handhold kind of support to help them. Whereas for me, I'm much more, let's get this resolved and let's move on and things like that.
Okay.
Besides
That's
those,
helpful.
Everyone else is fair game.
Yeah, I definitely see the benefit. It sounds like you try to be clear at the outset about what people can expect and what that process is going to look like. And as a therapist, I would just add that therapy is really for those that ultimately want to do more of that deep dive or looking for a specific modality, but really ultimately have that diagnosable mental health condition that really requires someone that has that training. But it sounds like this could be an incredible supplement, or for those individuals, well, that is not necessarily the primary focus. They can really hone in and learn some of those tangible skills to help them communicate better and collaborate, reach agreements, compromise. So you were referencing you see couples, and is this all stages of relationship? So if they're not yet married, or
Yes.
Do you
All
see people at all
stages.
stages?
Yeah,
Okay.
either
And you work with
individual.
individuals as well.
I do. Yeah, I work with
Mm-hmm.
individuals in relationships, and they're trying to figure out, how to make it better or whether they want to stay it or not. And then with couples as well. And the fun thing with couples is those who are coming in and already working on their relationship, sort of like at the back end of our coaching, I create, special outings for them. So when they join, I have a survey that goes out to them of all their interests and things like that. And then I curate outings for them. So I'll find that depending on where they live, a really nice restaurant, fun things to do during the day, and I coordinate with them, and then that's all included in the coaching, and then they go on their way. So the goal is that as they're rebuilding and creating their foundation stronger in our coaching, they can then take that and just go have fun with each other and bring back those memories and that spark and just go have a good time.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. So if people that are listening are interested in learning more about what you do, your particular style, ultimately want to work with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, so my website is nataliahernandezcoaching.com. Or I also have a free and private Facebook group called Relationship Mastery. Anyone can come join. I do workshops every month, and they're all saved in there. And then I also primarily hang out on Instagram. So my handle is at Natalia Hernandez Coaching. And yeah, I'd love to share more if anyone's interested.
Awesome. And tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Oh, yes. So I actually just finished my last episode yesterday. I'm going on a little hiatus, but it's called Total Relationship Mastery, and it's been on for a little over 130 episodes, I believe. And I've talked about the Enneagram and anything that anyone that was struggling with their relationship, communication, conflict, affairs, just everyday annoyances and how to, work through a pet peeve with a partner, how to better communicate, all of that I've really touched into in all those episodes. And then the last 3 episodes, I focused on leaving the relationship. It was a 3-part series. That seems to be a really hot topic for a lot of my listeners, and so I wanted to focus on that. But yeah, anything about healing, mending, or ending the relationship will be in there.
Okay. Well, it definitely sounds like worthwhile to listen. And are you planning to come back, or that'll be kind of dependent on how the hiatus goes?
No, I'm planning to come back. I love my podcast. I talk a lot, as you can tell. But I just needed a little break to focus on some other things that I wanted to get into.
Yeah. So what is next for you on your climb?
So right now I'm focusing on really communicating and reaching out to a lot of people. So I'm trying to really build up my connections and talk more instead of create more content, which I do a lot of. I'm a podcast and on Instagram and workshops, which I love to do all of that. But I'm trying to bring the part of me that loves to communicate with other human beings in real time. So I want to put my direction there. And so I'm trying to do more podcasts or workshops with other people, right? Things that involve more of a community feel versus just me coaching one-on-one with my clients or speaking, on like an Instagram story, for example.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're focusing more on the one-to-many. Well, I will definitely follow along. I'll include all of that information for the audience. I really appreciate your time today, the work that you do. I'm grateful that you found the Enneagram and that you're sharing what you know with the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.